The judge banged his gavel and slammed his hand on the bench, dismissing the defense with a cold, final tone. The courtroom fell silent as his decision seemed unchangeable. But then, from the back of the room, the defendant slowly stood up. His steady eyes and quiet strength hinted at a secret that could shatter the judge's certainty. In that electrifying moment, a chill ran through the courtroom. What truth did he carry? Was it a hidden piece of evidence, a personal story no one expected, or something even more startling? The silence grew heavier as everyone wondered. What will he reveal? Stay tuned, because what happens next could turn this case upside down and leave even the judge speechless. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with tension after the judge had dismissed Malcolm's defense so abruptly. The room, set in a busy urban district, buzzed with hushed whispers and uncertain looks. Rows of wooden seats faced a raised bench, where the judge's stern expression still lingered in everyone's mind. The harsh glow of fluorescent lights reflected off the polished floor, emphasizing every murmur and shuffle in the packed room. At the center of it all stood Malcolm, a black man whose calm presence spoke volumes despite the injustice he had just endured. His eyes, deep and steady, revealed a lifetime of quiet struggle. Malcolm's face bore the marks of both sorrow and strength. Each line told a story of battles fought against unfair judgment. Clutched in his hand was a small, worn notebook, its pages filled with memories and secrets, a subtle sign that there was far more to him than anyone had assumed. Around him, others in the courtroom played their parts. The prosecutor, a stern man in a dark suit, sat with an air of self-assured certainty, his expression unyielding and unsympathetic. The defense team, though present, seemed small and unsure, their eyes darting between Malcolm and the judge as if searching for a spark of hope. The judge, a figure of cold authority, had dismissed Malcolm's defense with a harsh finality that left little room for discussion. His voice had been heavy and biased, leaving the courtroom echoing with disbelief. In the gallery, a mix of jurors and members of the public leaned forward, their faces a blend of curiosity and concern. Some whispered to one another, clearly unsettled by the rapid dismissal of Malcolm's case. Every so often, a distant sound, a car passing on the busy street outside, or the soft hum of air conditioning, seemed to remind everyone that life continued beyond this moment of injustice. Malcolm stood quietly, absorbing the scene with a resigned yet determined look. Though he felt the sting of each dismissive word, he did not show anger. Instead, his expression was one of measured resolve. Every time the judge's harsh words echoed in the room, a flicker of pain crossed Malcolm's face, only to be replaced by the strength of a man who had endured much. It was clear to anyone watching that Malcolm was not merely a defendant fighting against the odds. He was a man with a deep and complex story that few had ever begun to understand. There was something in the way he held his notebook, a subtle hint that his life was filled with hidden depths and untold experiences. The courtroom, with its cold lights and steady murmur, was about to become the stage for revelation that would challenge all the assumptions made about him. Everyone waited with bated breath, wondering what truth Malcolm might soon unveil and how it would change the course of the day. The hush that had settled over the courtroom after everyone wondered what truth Malcolm might soon reveal soon turned into a storm of tension. The judge, a stern figure known for his quick judgments, leaned forward with a cold, dismissive glare as Malcolm concluded his defense. Without giving him a chance to fully explain himself, the judge slammed his gavel and declared, "I find no merit in this defense. Case dismissed." Immediately, the atmosphere shifted. The judge's words rang out like a final verdict, drowning out the soft whispers of those in the gallery. Some jurors exchanged uneasy glances, while a few spectators shook their heads in disbelief. In that moment, it was clear that the courtroom was steeped in prejudice. The judge's decision, made without careful consideration, was a product of long-held biases. Malcolm's heart sank as the reality of the dismissal hit him. He felt a mix of frustration, pain, and a deep sense of injustice. Every word the judge had uttered stung like a fresh wound. He had prepared his defense with care, drawing on years of hardship and struggle to explain his side of the story. Yet all his effort was brushed aside with a single, sharp statement. Despite the cold dismissal, Malcolm stood there, his face calm, but his eyes burning with quiet determination. As the judge's decision echoed through the room, murmurs of discontent began to rise among the onlookers. A few jurors shifted in their seats, and whispers of "that wasn't fair" spread slowly. In the public gallery, some people covered their mouths in shock while others recorded the moment on their phones. The tension was so thick that even the steady ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to pause, as if time itself had slowed down to absorb the injustice. Inside Malcolm, a storm was brewing. He felt the weight of every dismissive word and every biased assumption that had followed him all his life. For years, he had endured being seen only through the narrow lens of prejudice. The hurt was deep, but so was his resolve. He knew that he had a secret, a truth about his life that no one in that courtroom would have guessed. That truth, he believed, would one day expose the very injustice he now suffered. With the judge's harsh words still echoing, Malcolm felt the urge to respond. But he held back his immediate anger, choosing instead to let his quiet determination build within him. He looked out over the room, his gaze meeting the eyes of some sympathetic jurors and even a few of the public who nodded silently in agreement. These small signs of support fueled his inner strength. As the murmurs grew louder and the tension in the room became almost unbearable, Malcolm slowly clenched his fist. He knew he had to do something. He had to show that he was not defeated by this dismissal. In that charged moment, he took a deep breath, preparing himself for what would come next. His mind raced with the memories of every time he had been judged unfairly, every time his true worth had been overlooked because of his skin color. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, Malcolm began to stand taller. His eyes shone with a promise of truth, and his voice, when he finally spoke, was soft yet resolute. "I have something more to say," he began, his words measured and clear. The courtroom fell into a deeper silence, as if the very air was waiting for his next words to break the injustice that had been handed down. Every ear in the room strained to listen. The judge's haughty expression faltered as he sensed that Malcolm was not finished. In that moment, the stage was set for a revelation, a final statement that promised to unveil the secret behind Malcolm's quiet strength, a secret that might just change the course of the case. The tension was at its peak, and as Malcolm prepared to speak his final words, the promise of a stunning truth lingered in the air. Who was Malcolm really? What hidden role did he play that could shatter the biased verdict? The courtroom held its breath, waiting for the moment that would finally reveal everything. The courtroom was nearly silent, every eye fixed on Malcolm as he prepared to speak. The tension from the previous moments hung thickly in the air, and even the judge's stern gaze seemed to waver as he sensed that Malcolm was not finished. Now, with a deep breath, Malcolm rose to his feet. His voice, steady yet resolute, broke the silence. "I stand before you not as a criminal, but as a man with a truth that has been hidden for far too long," Malcolm declared. His words carried clearly throughout the room, and even the judge leaned forward, his expression hardening as he prepared to dismiss Malcolm once again. The judge, a man known for his cold, final decisions, banged his gavel sharply. "Mr. Malcolm, you are out of order. This courtroom is not the place for your outbursts. I have already ruled that your defense lacks merit." His tone was authoritative and dismissive, meant to silence any further protest. But Malcolm did not falter. He met the judge's glare with unwavering calm. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I ask you to listen, truly listen, to what I have to say," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I have endured years of being judged without being heard, and today I stand to reclaim my dignity." The murmurs in the room grew louder as some jurors and onlookers leaned forward, their faces a mix of hope and anticipation. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Malcolm, I will not tolerate any disruption. You will be held in contempt if you continue." He pounded the gavel again, but his words seemed to bounce off the resolute look on Malcolm's face. Undeterred, Malcolm continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. "I am not here to cause trouble. I am here to expose a truth that has been buried by assumptions and bias. Every time I have spoken, I have been dismissed because of the color of my skin, because of preconceived notions about who I am supposed to be." His words filled the room, and even some of the skeptical faces in the jury began to soften with understanding. As he spoke, the tension in the courtroom became almost palpable. The judge shifted in his seat, his expression a mix of anger and uncertainty. The defense team, who had previously been silent, exchanged worried glances. Even the prosecutor's confident smirk faltered for a brief moment. Malcolm's eyes, filled with both pain and determination, swept over the room. "I have spent my life fighting against injustice. I have been labeled, dismissed, and told that I was not enough simply because of who I am. But today, I will show you that I am much more than the labels you place upon me." His words resonated with every person in the room, striking a chord that echoed far beyond the courtroom walls. The judge's face grew red, his attempts to silence Malcolm now tinged with desperation. "Order! This is highly irregular," he shouted, but the rising murmurs of the audience drowned him out. Malcolm's voice, calm yet forceful, carried on. "In just a few moments, I will reveal the secret that I have held close for many years, a secret that will change your view of me and this case forever." The entire room seemed to lean in, breaths held in anticipation. The judge banged his gavel once more, trying to reassert control, but the collective focus of the crowd made it clear that no one was willing to let this moment slip away. Every eye was fixed on Malcolm as he took another slow breath. "I am not just a defendant here," he continued, his tone softening yet never losing its firmness. "I am a leader, an advocate, and a proud representative of a community that has been silenced for too long. Today, I stand to reveal my true role, a role that carries with it the responsibility to fight for justice and to prove that our worth is not measured by shallow judgments." At that moment, a hush fell over the courtroom. The judge's own expression wavered as he struggled to maintain control. The tension was so thick that even the sound of shuffling papers seemed to fade into the background. The jurors exchanged looks, some wide-eyed, others nodding slowly as they absorbed Malcolm's every word. "Your Honor, I ask you to consider not just the evidence, but the truth behind it. I ask you to see that the man before you is not a criminal, but a man of honor and a servant to my community." Malcolm paused, letting his words settle over the room. "In a few moments, I will share details that will leave no doubt about my identity and my commitment to justice. Prepare yourselves, because what you learn will not only change the outcome of this case, it will change the way you see all of us." The courtroom fell completely silent, the air thick with expectation. The judge's frown deepened as he realized that he was on the brink of a revelation he never saw coming. In that moment, the power balance shifted. Malcolm's calm strength began to overpower the judge's authority. Every person present could feel that something monumental was about to happen, a secret that would force the dismissal of prejudice and demand a true examination of justice. The stage was now set for the stunning twist that would expose Malcolm's true role, leaving no one the same. After a long, pregnant pause that left the courtroom trembling with anticipation, Malcolm took a deep breath. His eyes, steady and resolute, met those of the judge and the silent jurors. Then, with a calm yet powerful voice, he spoke the words no one expected. "I have lived a life filled with challenges and unjust assumptions," he began. "But today, I stand before you not as merely a defendant, but as someone who has long worked behind the scenes to bring justice to our community." The room fell even quieter as every listener strained to catch his next words. Slowly, Malcolm reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. He opened it to reveal a series of documents, certificates, and official commendations. With each paper he laid out, the truth began to unfold. "I am not just a man on trial," he declared. "I am the chief advisor on civil rights for this city, a role I have held for the past 8 years. His voice, once subdued, now rang with undeniable authority. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. The judge's previously stern expression softened into one of disbelief. The jurors, who had once looked at Malcolm with skepticism, now exchanged looks of shock and admiration. Even the prosecutor's confident smirk vanished, replaced by an expression of regret as he realized the magnitude of the error he had made in underestimating him. Malcolm continued, his tone imbued with both pride and a hint of sorrow. "For years, I have fought against bias and injustice, often from the shadows, because I knew the system would never see me if I showed my true self." He paused, letting his words settle in the heavy air. "I chose to remain silent and humble, in order to bring about change quietly, until the time was right. Today, that time has come." The room buzzed with murmurs of disbelief as the papers confirmed his words. One document read, "Awarded the City Medal for Excellence in Public Service," while another stated, "Recognized as a leading advocate for civil rights." Each piece of evidence dismantled the image the courtroom had of a man who was merely a defendant, revealing instead a respected leader who had dedicated his life to protecting others from the very injustices they now witnessed. The judge leaned forward, his face a mixture of shock and remorse. "Mr. Malcolm, I cannot believe what I am hearing," he stammered. This is extraordinary." His voice, once filled with unyielding authority, now wavered as he grappled with the new reality before him. In that moment, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted dramatically. What had begun as a case marred by prejudice transformed into a powerful lesson on the dangers of quick judgment. The jurors and onlookers, who had once dismissed Malcolm, now sat in stunned silence. Their eyes, wide with realization, mirrored a collective understanding that assumptions could be shattered by truth. Malcolm's revelation not only cleared his name, but also exposed the deep-seated bias that had led to his earlier dismissal. "I have spent my entire life fighting to be heard despite the noise of prejudice," he said softly. "Today, I ask that you all listen, not just to the words, but to the truth they carry. Let this be a reminder that every person has a story, and every story deserves to be heard before we pass judgment. As his words echoed through the silent courtroom, even the defense team, which had once seemed so small and overwhelmed, looked on with newfound respect. The courtroom, once a place of cold finality, had transformed into a space where truth and dignity reclaimed their power. The judge, now visibly shaken, set his gavel aside for a moment. "Mr. Malcolm, your revelation it is a wake-up call to us all," he said, his voice subdued. "I will ensure that this case is reevaluated in light of the truth you have shared." The tension that had gripped the room began to ease as the reality of Malcolm's true identity settled over everyone. For Malcolm, this moment was more than just a personal victory. It was a triumph over the biases that had shadowed his life. With his secret laid bare, he had not only challenged the courtroom's narrow view, but had also sparked a conversation about justice and the power of looking beyond appearances. In that charged, unforgettable moment, the true measure of a man was revealed, and the courtroom would never be the same. After the courtroom fell silent in the wake of Malcolm's stunning revelation, the atmosphere began to shift. The judge, who had once dismissed Malcolm's defense with cold certainty, now sat quietly with a troubled expression. His gavel lay untouched on the bench as he struggled to reconcile the truth Malcolm had laid bare with the earlier proceedings. In that moment, it became clear that the case could no longer be treated with the same dismissive bias. Within minutes, news of Malcolm's true identity spread throughout the courtroom and beyond. Reporters in the gallery began scribbling notes furiously, and whispers turned into murmurs that reached the ears of everyone present. The media soon picked up the story, and headlines began to form. Defendant revealed as chief advisor on civil rights, and hidden truth shakes courtroom. The shock on the faces of the jury and the public was evident. Many now realized how deeply the system had underestimated Malcolm. In the days that followed, the incident sparked a firestorm of discussion, both inside the legal community and among the general public. The police department and the court were forced to launch a full investigation into the case. It wasn't long before the judge's ruling was officially set aside, and the case was reopened for a fair reevaluation. The decision sent ripples through the community as people began to question long-held assumptions about justice and fairness. At a public hearing later that week, the judge, now solemn and regretful, addressed the courtroom. "I deeply regret that my earlier decision was clouded by bias," he said, his voice subdued. "Today, we have learned that our duty is not only to enforce the law, but to ensure that every person is treated with dignity and respect. We must never let prejudice override justice." His words, though measured, carried the weight of a system beginning to acknowledge its shortcomings. Outside the courtroom, community leaders and civil rights activists organized meetings to discuss the broader implications of Malcolm's case. At one such gathering in a local community center, people shared their own stories of being judged unfairly. "I used to think I was alone in feeling this pain," one woman confessed, tears welling in her eyes. "But Malcolm's courage has given us hope that things can change." The discussion grew heated and heartfelt, uniting those who had long suffered under the weight of bias with those determined to see reform. Malcolm himself, once seen merely as a defendant, now became a symbol of resilience and the power of truth. In an interview with a local news station, he spoke softly but firmly. "I have spent my entire life fighting against the odds and being misjudged because of the color of my skin," he said. "Today, I stand not only for myself, but for every person who has ever been dismissed without a fair chance. I hope my story encourages others to keep fighting for what is right." His words resonated far beyond the courtroom, inspiring many to speak out against injustice. The impact of Malcolm's revelation even reached the halls of power. The city's civil rights office announced plans to review its policies regarding bias and discrimination in the legal system. New training programs were set in motion for judges and law enforcement officers, aimed at ensuring that decisions would be made based on facts and fairness rather than assumptions. Community leaders praised these steps as a significant move towards rebuilding trust in the system. For Malcolm, the journey was far from over. While the reopening of his case and the subsequent reforms marked a significant victory, he knew that changing deeply ingrained prejudices would take time. Still, he felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that his truth had opened a door to a better future. Every time he thought of the painful moments in the courtroom, the dismissive tone of the judge, the skepticism of the jury, he now also remembered the day his voice broke through the silence and demanded justice. In a small ceremony held at a local community center, Malcolm received recognition from a coalition of civil rights groups for his bravery and perseverance. Standing before a crowd of supporters, he said, "I stand here today because I refused to be defined by others' assumptions. Each of us has hidden potential that the world too often ignores. Let my story be a reminder that truth and determination can overcome even the strongest forces of prejudice." His words were met with applause and cheers, a testament to the hope that now stirred in the hearts of many. As the courtroom and community began to heal, the case of Malcolm became a powerful lesson for all. It taught that justice is not a fixed outcome, but a living process that requires constant vigilance and compassion. It reminded everyone that every person, regardless of their background, deserves to be seen for who they truly are, and that sometimes the truth has the power to change not just a case, but an entire system. In the end, Malcolm's revelation proved to be a turning point, a moment that sparked change in hearts and minds alike. It showed that while injustice may prevail for a time, the power of truth and dignity can never be silenced forever. And as the city lights glowed softly in the evening, there was a collective sense of hope. A hope that the future would be brighter, fairer, and more just for everyone. As the story of Malcolm's fight for justice spread across the city, the lessons learned in that courtroom resonated deeply with the community. What had begun as a case of racial bias turned into a movement, igniting change in hearts and minds everywhere. Malcolm's courageous stand had won the respect and admiration of countless people, and his efforts led to a profound shift in both the legal system and the community. What did you learn from this story? Have you ever been judged unfairly or witnessed others being dismissed because of their background or appearance? Take a moment to reflect, because the truth is, hidden potential is often overlooked, and it's up to each of us to challenge these biases and see people for who they truly are. If Malcolm's story inspired you, share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Let us know how we can all fight for fairness, equality, and understanding in our own lives. Like and subscribe for more stories that reveal the truth and transform the way we think about justice. Thank you for being part of this powerful journey of truth and change. Together, we can create a better, more compassionate world where every person's worth is recognized and every story is heard